We have something really special on this episode from Pro Engineering. This, as you can tell, is a Hotshot. This is the most recent success for the vintage Tamiya community, which is made possible by all the people that supported the crowdfunding campaign to make this MIP ball differential set for the Hotshot a success. Let's get started. I'm not going to install it on this car. This actually belongs to a friend, and it was used in the development. This is a brand new re-release car. The car that we'll be installing it in is... oh man, it's not going to be easy. Before we get started, make sure that your workspace is clean. This mat doesn't look too clean, but we're going to take a little bit of alcohol and just kind of wipe it down. I just want to make sure that I don't get any kind of contaminants, dirt, sand, oil, you name it, into this diff. So this is part number 17160 from MIP. This is the Hotshot and Tamiya BigWig front and rear ball differential set. What I wanted to make note of here is this is not simply a differential. This also comes with new dog bones. It also has a tool to ream out the axle openings in the transmission cases to install the new differential with the larger flanged bearings. This is the instruction manual that comes with the MIP ball differential sets, and it's going to walk us through the entire assembly, and everything here is included. It also comes with a special grease that we're going to use. We have an MIP grease and then we have a clear silicone grease. These are all the components that you are going to get to build this differential set. As you can see, it's simply 2 of 2 plus 2 sets of axles. As you can see, we can basically break this down into 2 and 2. That's pretty much what we've got here. So we have 2 complete sets, one for the front and one for the rear. Before we begin, I must be very, very clear in that these larger diff balls, these are 3 30-seconds differential balls, are not to be confused with the smaller quantity 5/64 thrust balls. You do not want to lose these, so I would open this up in a small container so that in the event something does fall out, it falls into the container. Step 1, we are going to assemble the thrust bearing assembly. So I'm going to open up this bag here, and again, I'm just doing it inside of a small container so that these balls stay put. We'll begin by taking one of these washers and sliding them over the small screw over here. This is not a standard washer. This is a hardened steel thrust washer. So if you lose one, don't think you can replace it with just any old washer. The method I like to use to insert these little balls is we're going to take some of the blue MIP grease and simply touch it over one of the balls here, and that will get it stuck on the screwdriver, and simply scrape it right off and it will stay put. And I'm going to put a little bit more just on this washer in general, and we'll repeat that step 5 more times. So there's a total of 6 of these thrust balls. All 6 of these have been applied, and now we'll take our other thrust washer and slip it over the top. I may have a little bit too much grease here, but it's easier to wipe it off after the fact than it is while all the bearings are kind of sitting there. We'll push this top down and simply spin the assembly around and wipe that grease over all of them. And this is our thrust bearing assembly. You're going to need to do 2 of these, one for the front and one for the rear diffs. For this next phase, take the outdrive that has the little nipple. This is the male side. And you're going to place the diff ring straight on top of it, as well as this 5x8 bearing. Next, I'm going to place the differential gear right there simply so it can stay put, and we'll begin to install all of the diff balls. As before, I'm going to place all of those balls in this container. Much like before, I'll take some of the clear silicone grease, just a little dab on the front of the screwdriver, and we'll pick up one of the diff balls. Picked up 3, may have been too many. All right, and we'll just drop those into place like that. If you have a different method that is perfectly acceptable, I find that this works best for me. Okay, and complete that for every single one of these. You must use every single diff ball. If one of them happens to have gotten lost, please contact MIP for a replacement. All the diff balls have been installed. I'll pull the diff back off and apply a very light coating of grease on this diff ring. Please use the correct grease. You do not want to use the MIP grease. You want to use the silicone grease. Set this right back on top. I'm now going to install the thrust assembly, and we're going to do that like so. Okay, that is now in. We can now take the female side. Now this is the one that has the depression as opposed to the nipple. We're also going to install a diff ring on this one. So I'm going to set that right here. You will also want to install another one of those 5x8 ball bearings right there. Flip this over. You are then going to take the T-nut and the insert and simply slide it in with the little through hole aligned with the T-nut. So just like that. We'll come back over here. Drop in that spring and the T-nut assembly here. I'm going to apply a little bit more grease on this surface and then we'll join the two. I've applied a bit more of the silicone grease here on this top surface. When the two halves of the diff are compressed, the silicone grease will be pushed around the diff balls, providing adequate lubrication. So please do not forget to put the silicone grease on there. All right, at this point here, we'll take this out drive and the rest of the differential and mate them like so. Using a 5/64 Allen wrench, you'll want to head and thread this in. And as it goes in, you'll note that the silver T-nut is slowly being pulled in. So I snugged it up until the internal spring applied a little bit of tension. There's about a 2mm gap right there. By hand, it feels good. Remember that if you're not seeing this counter rotating of the differential, you may have installed the thrust balls where the diff balls belong and vice versa. So please ensure that you have very smooth motion. I'm going to be quiet for a moment just so you can hear this. There should be no sound. If you're hearing grinding or crunching, something is wrong. Now this differential is adjustable externally. You will be able to use that same nut driver, which is not supplied in the kit. Again, that is a 5/64 nut driver. Push it in there, tighten it or loosen it. What you do not want is slippage here. If you are experiencing slippage, this nut may have backed out slightly. At this point here, do everything I just did once again for the other diff. As soon as you have the two completed differentials, you can put those aside and disassemble your Hotshot, which should take 2 or 3 weeks. The next major step is going to be to modify the gearboxes. This will need to be done to both the left and right of the front and rear gearboxes. And we're going to focus on this rear, but it's going to be the same for the both fronts as well as the other half of the rear gearbox. When you disassemble the gearbox, do not remove the outdrive. This is a re-release car, so it has the big C-clip. If you have the original car with that tiny, ridiculous little wire, go ahead and again, leave it installed in the car. The reason for this is this bore in the center of this drill bit will slip over the input shaft of the outdrive. Okay, so this way here, it is impossible to incorrectly drill this out. This will slip directly over that. With the drill turned on, it'll slowly cut in there. And when you've completed this, the whole assembly will punch out of this side and stop on this flange right here. There's another little region right here. It's another little cutter that creates a small internal recess for the flange on the flanged ball bearing. All right, I have the bit installed and I'm not going to edit any of this. This is the first time also me doing this. So we're just gonna let the video run and see how it goes. It's pretty important not to let this touch your hand because it will be spinning. So make sure that you've got it supported in some way, whether it's probably in a vise. Okay, I've got this just sitting in the vise. Okay, make sure that the drill is set to forward. Set it right on top and it will drop when it's in place. And just do this very slowly. There's no reason to rush. I'm going to stop for just a second and see how it's going here. Right, bit doesn't want to come out, so we're just going to back the chuck off here. Okay. Going. There we go. Okay, so there's our nice hole. here is our drive with the bearing or the bushing, whatever it was. At this point here, you can now pop out the C-clip, retrieve the bearing, and you're good to go. Just to know, it is a little bit warm right now, so just be careful. You don't want to touch it hot. When you've completed drilling out the hole, please take this gearbox out and rinse it out, dust it out. You do not want to have any of these contaminants in here. They will cause premature wear and damage to your gear train. Once you have it done to all of the axles, front and rear, you want to then take the ball bearing that comes with the MIP kit, push it in, and seat it all the way. And do that to both sides, front and rear. The next thing we're going to do is reassemble the gearbox and just make sure that nothing is improperly aligned. You want to make sure that this is properly seated and spinning freely. So once the gearbox is prepped, we'll just do a test fit, so I'm not going to bother having the sway bar mount or the battery door hinge. We'll just slip the longer side through the bearing, just like that. And we'll put the other half of the gearbox on. Rear gearbox is just kind of held together lightly here. I'm going to just spin the output shaft, spinning nice and free. Same with the front. Okay, make sure there's no binding or anything of that nature. Also make sure that you put this in the correct orientation. It is possible to put this diff gear in both ways. However, only one orientation will it properly line up with the idler gear. I'll put the pivot point in now for the battery door and the sway bar mount and button this transmission up. Both transmissions were buttoned up and reinstalled back in the car. This is a vintage Hotshot, but it'll work the same with a vintage or re-release. As for the BigWig, I simply don't have one to install, but the process should be the same. The front dog bone, much like the stock one, has a small rib, which indicates the front. If you have a re-release like this car is here, you're also going to have that little rib on the stock bones. And upon closer examination, you'll notice that one side is larger than the other. It's impossible to install backwards because the large side will not fit into the stock hub. I went ahead and just disconnected my front tie rod, and we'll just slide the dog bone into the drive cup, and I'll just, there you go. So that side is now installed. The standard O-rings that come with the Hotshot that are normally in the outdrive, I removed since there was not enough axial play to require them. And I did the same with the rear. Now, as for the rear, go ahead and take off one of your screw pins like I've done over here, or if you own an old Hotshot, just give it a good shake and something will fall off. All right, so the rear end, again, has a dog bone that does not have the rib, and like the front, it can only be installed one way. So we put the larger end directly into the MIP hub and then install this here. Now, as for the vehicles that are not supported by this differential, the Boomerang, Hotshot 2, and the other vehicles that share similar parts to the Hotshot, it's not that those aren't going to be compatible, it's that they may require additional components or spacers. I know that the Boomerang will require a spacer in the MIP outdrive, so just keep that in mind. I'm now going to reattach my turnbuckle, give the ball diff a nice turn. Very, very silky smooth. Same with the rear. Do make sure that there's no snagging or locking, and again, turn full left, full right to make sure that you find no binding. You should have a very, very smooth turning, just like it was with the factory components. As much as I would love to take this for a drive, all of the suspension is either broken or prototype 3D printed. You can see how excellent the rear suspension is. Quite nice, basically your standard Hotshot. The other side was even worse, so these are all temporary 3D printed parts. So as much as I'd love to drive this, you're going to have to bear with me as I have to put some more stuff together on this car. But I did want to cover the full installation of the MIP ball differential kit for the Hotshot and BigWig. If you have any questions about the installation, please let me know. If you have any questions about the actual MIP product, please contact MIP support and they will contact you as soon as possible. Well, folks, thank you all so much for watching, and those of you who did follow this crowd-funded campaign, thank you all again very much. This was a tremendous success for the vintage community, and I hope we do something else with MIP in the future. Please subscribe. You can add me on Instagram and Facebook as well at Ampro Engineering, and check out Blue Pinto, who lets me use their music, and their Facebook page is in the end credits. We will see everyone next time.